Cat refuses to leave crying baby's side, then reveals an incredible instinct. It started with a cry. 6-month-old Leo's wails broke through the calm of the Harris household, crackling over the baby monitor on the coffee table. Emily Harris, curled up on the couch with a half-finished cup of tea, sighed as she prepared to climb the stairs. "Your turn," she muttered to her husband, Ryan, half joking but already rising. But before either of them could move, their tabby cat, Mittens, darted from the shadows of the living room and bolted upstairs. "Mittens!" Emily called after her, startled. The cat didn't respond. Within seconds, she disappeared around the corner, her footsteps barely audible against the carpeted stairs. "What's gotten into her?" Ryan asked, raising an eyebrow. Emily shrugged. Her curiosity piqued as she followed Mittens. By the time she reached the nursery, she froze. There, in Leo's crib, Mittens was curled up next to the baby, her striped body pressed protectively against him. Leo's cries softened to hiccups as Mittens purred loudly, a soothing hum that filled the small room. Emily blinked, momentarily stunned. Mittens had always been affectionate, but this was different. The cat's green eyes flicked toward Emily, her body tense and her ears twitching at every faint noise in the room. "What are you doing in there?" Emily whispered, stepping closer. She reached out to lift Mittens from the crib, but the cat let out a low, deliberate growl. Emily froze, her hand hovering in the air. Mittens had never growled at her before. The growl wasn't aggressive, it was protective. Mittens shifted slightly, pressing closer to Leo as if guarding him. Emily's unease grew. She glanced around the nursery, searching for something, anything that could explain the cat's strange behavior. But everything looked normal. The soft glow of the nightlight bathed the room in a warm hue, and Leo's mobile swayed gently above his crib. By the time Ryan appeared in the doorway, Emily was still standing frozen in place, staring at the scene. "What's going on?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "It's Mittens," Emily said, her voice hushed. "She ran in here and look at her. She won't leave him." Ryan stepped into the room, peering into the crib. "Huh, maybe she's just trying to comfort him? She growled at me when I tried to move her." Ryan laughed softly. "Mittens? Growling? She's the least intimidating cat in the world." "I'm serious," Emily insisted, her voice firm. "This isn't normal. She's been acting weird all day, pacing around staring at the baby monitor like it's about to explode. And now this?" Ryan shrugged. "Cats do weird things sometimes. She probably just likes the crib." But Emily wasn't convinced. There was something deliberate about Mittens' behavior, something almost calculated. The way she positioned herself beside Leo, the intensity in her gaze, it was as if she was standing guard. And though Emily didn't know it yet, Mittens wasn't just watching over the baby. She was sensing something no one else could. The next morning, sunlight poured into the Harris household, but Emily couldn't shake the image of Mittens curled protectively around Leo. She carried the baby downstairs, her mind still running through the events of the night. Mittens followed closely, as if tethered to Leo, her sharp green eyes scanning every corner of the room. Emily set Leo in his bouncer, watching as Mittens stationed herself nearby, never taking her eyes off the baby. Ryan, still in his pajamas, grabbed a mug of coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter. "So, did Mittens go full babysitter again this morning?" he asked, smirking. Emily didn't laugh. "She didn't leave his side all night," she said, her voice tinged with unease. "Ryan, this isn't normal. She's been doing this for days now, pacing outside his room, staring at the baby monitor like it's the most fascinating thing in the world. And last night she growled at me when I tried to move her." Ryan raised an eyebrow, sipping his coffee. "She's a cat, Em. They're weird. Maybe she's just being protective." Emily shook her head. "It's not just that. She's acting like something's wrong, like she knows something we don't." Ryan chuckled. "Like what? She's a cat, not a psychic." Emily didn't respond. She wasn't sure what she believed, but Mittens' behavior didn't feel random. It felt purposeful. Later that day, Emily decided to keep a closer eye on Mittens. As Leo napped in his crib, Emily sat in the nursery, folding laundry while Mittens perched on the edge of the crib. The cat's ears twitched with every faint noise, her tail flicking back and forth in agitation. At one point, Mittens turned her head sharply toward the baby monitor on the dresser. She stared at it, her body stiffening as if ready to pounce. Emily frowned. She picked up the monitor, inspecting it. The screen showed Leo sleeping peacefully, and the device itself seemed fine. But Mittens wouldn't take her eyes off it, her pupils narrowing as the faintest static crackled through the speaker. "What are you staring at?" Emily muttered, setting the monitor back down. Mittens didn't move. That night, the pattern repeated. As soon as Leo started crying, Mittens bolted into the nursery, leaping into the crib before Emily could even reach the stairs. By the time Emily arrived, the cat was already curled around the baby, her loud purring filling the room. Once again, Mittens growled softly when Emily tried to move her. It wasn't aggression, it was a warning. Ryan brushed it off, but Emily couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was wrong. Determined to figure out what was going on, she decided to document Mittens' behavior. She set up her phone in the nursery, propping it on a shelf with the camera pointed toward the crib. If Mittens was reacting to something, Emily wanted to see what it was. The following morning, Emily reviewed the footage over her morning coffee. For the first few minutes, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Mittens paced around the crib, meowing softly before settling down beside Leo. But as Emily watched, her heart skipped a beat. At one point during the night, Mittens suddenly stood up, her ears swiveling toward the baby monitor. She stared at it, her body tense, and let out a low, sharp meow. Emily replayed the clip, leaning closer to the screen. As Mittens meowed, a faint sound came through the monitor, an odd, barely audible whirring noise. It was brief, lasting only a few seconds, but it was enough to make Emily's skin prickle. She hadn't noticed the sound before, and Leo's cries had likely masked it when she was in the room. "What is that?" she whispered to herself. She replayed the footage again and again, each time focusing on the strange sound. It didn't seem to come from the nursery itself. There was nothing in the room that could make a noise like that. But Mittens had clearly heard it, and her reaction had been immediate. That evening, Emily showed the clip to Ryan. He frowned as he watched, the smirk he'd worn earlier replaced by a look of concern. "That's weird," he admitted. "Maybe it's interference. Baby monitors pick up random signals sometimes." "Then why is Mittens reacting to it?" Emily countered. "She's been fixated on that monitor for days. What if she's hearing something we can't?" Ryan hesitated. "I don't know, Em. Maybe we're overthinking this." "Maybe we're not," Emily said firmly. "Something's bothering her, and I think it's connected to that sound." Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, let's keep an ear out tonight. If we hear it again, we'll figure out what's going on." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Something was wrong in that nursery, and Mittens was trying to tell them what it was. She just didn't know how to make them listen. That night, Emily found herself wide awake long after Ryan had drifted off beside her. The strange noise from the baby monitor and Mittens' behavior played over and over in her mind. She lay staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what the cat was sensing. The logical side of her brain told her it was probably nothing, just a quirky phase Mittens was going through. But deep down, she couldn't let it go. There was something more to this, something she didn't yet understand. As if on cue, Leo's cries broke through the baby monitor on her nightstand. Emily bolted upright, her heart racing. She nudged Ryan awake, but before either of them could move, they heard the soft patter of Mittens' paws on the stairs. The cat was already on her way to the nursery. Emily followed, her bare feet padding silently on the carpet. When she reached the doorway, she froze, just as she had the night before. Mittens was in the crib again, curled protectively around Leo. Her body was rigid, her ears flat against her head as she let out a low, rumbling growl. But this time, her eyes weren't on the baby. She was staring at the baby monitor. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She moved closer, straining to hear what Mittens was reacting to. The monitor crackled faintly, and then there it was again, the same faint whirring noise she had heard in the footage. It was louder this time, almost mechanical, like the hum of a machine trying to start. "What is that?" Emily whispered, leaning down to pick up the monitor. The sound faded as quickly as it had come, leaving only static in its wake. Mittens let out another growl, her body tense and unyielding. Ryan appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on now?" Emily turned to him, holding up the monitor. "It's the sound again. That same noise from last night. It's coming through the monitor." Ryan frowned, his grogginess giving way to concern. "What kind of sound?" "Listen again," Emily urged, holding it out towards him. But the monitor was silent now, the noise gone. She shook her head, frustration mounting. It was there! Mittens heard it too! Ryan stepped into the room, glancing at the cat. She's acting like there's something in here. Emily nodded, her voice low. She's not just protecting Leo. She's trying to tell us something. I can feel it. Ryan crouched beside the crib, watching Mittens carefully. The cat's eyes flicked toward him briefly, then back to the monitor, as if warning him not to get too close. Okay, he said slowly. Maybe there's interference, or maybe, I don't know. But if Mittens is this worked up, maybe we should check the nursery. Emily exhaled in relief. Finally, Ryan was starting to take her seriously. The two of them spent the next hour combing through the room. Ryan checked the baby monitor's wiring, unplugging and replugging it to see if it made a difference. Emily inspected the crib, the walls, even the vents, looking for anything out of place. But everything seemed normal. There was no sign of anything that could explain the sound or Mittens' behavior. Nothing, Ryan said finally, leaning against the crib. The monitor works fine. There's nothing weird about the room. I don't know what else to check. Emily bit her lip, glancing at Mittens. The cat was still in the crib, her body coiled tight like a spring. She didn't look reassured by their efforts. It has to be something, Emily said. That noise wasn't in our heads, and Mittens doesn't act like this for no reason. Ryan sighed. Look, I get it, but what are we supposed to do? Call a ghost hunter? He shook his head, his tone softening. Maybe she's just picking up on something small. A smell, a sound we can't hear. She's a cat, Em. Their instincts are different. Emily wasn't satisfied with that answer, but she let it go for the moment. Fine, let's go back to bed. But if I hear that sound again, we're calling someone. That wasn't an idle threat. The next morning, after another restless night, Emily decided to call a technician to inspect the baby monitor and the nursery's electrical setup. The noise might be harmless interference, but she needed to know for sure. The technician arrived later that afternoon, a middle-aged man named Carl who had been doing home inspections for over a decade. He listened patiently as Emily described the strange noise and Mittens' behavior, nodding thoughtfully as she spoke. Sometimes these monitors pick up radio frequencies, Carl explained as he unpacked his tools. Could be a neighbor's device or something nearby, but if you're hearing it consistently, it might be worth checking the wiring in the room. Emily led him to the nursery where Mittens was once again perched by the crib, watching Leo like a hawk. Carl raised an eyebrow. Your cat really doesn't leave him, huh? She hasn't for days, Emily said. That's part of why we're worried. Carl got to work testing the outlets, the baby monitor, and even the heating vent in the corner of the room. Emily hovered nearby, wringing her hands as she waited for him to find something, anything that could explain what was happening. Finally, Carl straightened up, his expression grim. I found something, he said, his voice low. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What is it? Carl gestured toward the heating vent. There's a gas leak. It's small, barely detectable, but it's there, that whirring sound you're hearing. That's the vent trying to push the gas through. It's not enough to smell yet, but over time, it could have been dangerous. Really dangerous. Emily felt her knees go weak. A gas leak? She whispered. Oh my God. Carl nodded. It's a good thing you called me. This could have gotten a lot worse. Emily's mind raced. Mittens had known. Somehow she had sensed the danger before anyone else. The cat's strange behavior, her refusal to leave Leo's side, it all made sense now. As Carl packed up his tools and made arrangements to fix the leak, Emily sat on the nursery floor watching Mittens. The cat had finally relaxed, stretching out beside the crib with a satisfied flick of her tail. For the first time in days, she looked at peace. Emily reached out and stroked Mittens' fur, tears welling in her eyes. You saved him, she whispered. You saved all of us. Later that evening, after the gas leak had been sealed and the technician assured them the house was safe, Emily sat in the nursery with Leo in her arms. She rocked gently in the chair by the window, her gaze fixed on Mittens, who lay sprawled near the crib, her tail flicking lazily. For the first time in days, the tension that had weighed on the household seemed to lift. But Emily's heart was still racing as she replayed Carl's words in her mind. A gas leak. The danger had been invisible, undetectable to human senses, yet Mittens had somehow known. She had sensed the threat, refused to leave Leo's side, and done everything in her power to warn them. Without her, Emily couldn't even bear to think about what might have happened. Ryan walked into the room, his expression a mix of relief and awe. "Leo finally asleep?" he asked, nodding toward the baby, who had just begun to doze off in Emily's arms. "Out like a light," Emily replied softly. She looked down at Leo's tiny face, peaceful and untroubled, and felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. "Ryan, we were so close to losing him." Ryan knelt beside her, resting a hand on her arm. "But we didn't," he said firmly, "because of her." They both turned their eyes to Mittens, who blinked back at them with calm, knowing eyes. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the repaired vent and the baby's soft breaths. "She knew," Emily said, her voice breaking slightly. "She tried to warn us over and over, and I didn't listen. I thought she was just being strange. I almost ignored her completely." Ryan nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't even take her seriously, but she didn't stop, Em. She stayed with him every night, even when we didn't understand what she was doing. She never gave up." Emily reached down and gently stroked Mitten's fur. The cat purred softly, nuzzling against her hand. "You're a hero," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved him. You saved all of us." For the first time in days, Emily felt the tears spill over. She buried her face in Ryan's shoulder, her body shaking with quiet sobs. Ryan held her tightly, his own eyes glistening as he pressed a kiss to her temple. "She's more than a cat," he said softly. "She's family." In the days that followed, Mitten's bond with Leo grew even stronger. The cat rarely left his side, as if her protective instincts hadn't fully subsided. Whether he was napping in his crib, playing on the floor, or sitting in Emily's lap, Mittens was always there, her watchful eyes scanning the room. Emily couldn't help but smile as she watched the two of them together. One afternoon, while Leo played on a soft blanket in the living room, Mittens sprawled beside him, batting at a colorful toy he had dropped. Leo giggled, his chubby hands reaching out to grab her fur. Instead of pulling away, Mittens stayed perfectly still, allowing the baby to explore. Emily grabbed her phone and snapped a picture, her heart swelling at the sight of their unlikely bond. "You know," Ryan said as he walked in with a cup of coffee, "I think she's officially earned her spot as Leo's guardian angel." "She's more than that," Emily replied, her voice full of warmth. "She's his best friend." The family's gratitude for Mittens only deepened as the weeks went on. They made sure to spoil her with all her favorite things: soft blankets, special treats, and plenty of belly rubs, which she reluctantly allowed. But more than anything, they showered her with love, vowing never to take her loyalty and intelligence for granted again. The story of what had happened in the Harris household quickly spread among their friends and family. Emily shared the details cautiously at first, unsure of how people would react. But to her surprise, everyone was captivated by the tale of Mittens' extraordinary instincts. Neighbors stopped by to see the hero cat, and even the technician who had discovered the gas leak told the story to his coworkers, marveling at how a simple house cat had likely saved a life. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Emily looked over at Ryan. "Do you think animals understand more than we give them credit for?" she asked. Ryan smiled. "I think Mittens does. She didn't just sense danger, she acted on it. She did everything she could to protect Leo. That's more than instinct. That's love." Emily nodded, her gaze drifting to Mittens, who was curled up at the foot of the couch with Leo's favorite stuffed animal between her paws. "It's incredible," she said softly. "We've always thought of her as part of the family, but now it's more than that. She's taught me something, Ryan." "What's that?" he asked, leaning closer. "She's taught me to pay attention, to trust that animals notice things we don't. She saw what we couldn't, and she didn't stop until we listened." Ryan nodded. "She's one of a kind." "No," Emily said, shaking her head. "I think animals are more connected to us than we realize. Mittens is special, but I think there are a lot of animals out there who have instincts like hers. We just don't always notice." That night, as Emily tucked Leo into bed, Mittens jumped into the crib and settled beside him, purring softly. Emily stood for a moment, watching them, her heart full. She thought about how easily they could have overlooked Mittens's warnings, how close they had come to a tragedy. But instead, they had been given a gift, a reminder of the bond between humans and animals, and the extraordinary ways that love can transcend species. As she turned out the light and headed downstairs, Emily whispered a silent prayer of thanks for Leo's safety, for Mittens's unwavering loyalty, and for the family they had built together. And in the nursery, under the soft glow of the nightlight, Mittens kept watch, her green eyes shining with quiet vigilance. She had done her job, but her instincts told her she wasn't done protecting her family just yet.